They said it right before disappearing into the crowd. "Mom, you're a burden." That's how my daughter, Emily, and her husband, David, left me standing alone on a street corner in New York City during what was supposed to be a family vacation. I stood there, holding a melting ice cream cone, my phone with no signal, no ticket, no keys, and not a single word of apology. I waited for 8 hours under the blazing sun until a kind stranger stopped and asked if I needed help. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I simply made one phone call to my lawyer back in California. What Emily and David didn't know was that the house they were living in was still legally under my name. And when their plane landed back in California, they didn't return home. They returned to nothing. I knew they'd have to beg me for the rest of their lives. For 40 years, I worked behind the counter at Morgan & Associates travel agency in San Francisco, helping others plan dream vacations while my own dreams slowly faded away. Every morning at 7 a.m., I unlocked the office door with a cup of coffee in a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Mom," a gift from Emily when she was 8, and still believed it. After my husband, Richard, passed away, every dollar I earned was divided into 3 parts. One for living expenses, one saved for Emily, and the last tucked inside a small tin coffee can my someday fund. But that someday never came. Instead came Emily's medical bills, car payments, the down payment for her house, school uniforms for the grandkids, Olivia and Jack, $5,000 for her wedding, and another $20,000 when David lost his job. I still remember the night Emily called me in tears. "Mom, we don't have enough money for the summer trip we promised the kids." Olivia keeps asking. "They deserve to see the world, Mom. Not like us, you and me, we never went anywhere." I didn't remind her that. I'd dreamed of visiting New York City since I was 20, or that I'd collected postcards of the Bethesda fountain for decades. Instead, I quietly withdrew the last $8,000 from my retirement savings. "Perfect, Mom," Emily squealed when I handed her the plane tickets. "It's going to be just like in the movies." But when she hugged me, her arms felt hollow and cold, like she was hugging an obligation. San Francisco International Airport buzzed with the sound of summer travel. Families rolled their suitcases, kids darted between rows of chairs. The scent of coffee and pastries mixed with jet fuel. I stood near the boarding gate, clutching my worn leather purse against my chest, watching Emily organize everyone's papers with the same precision she'd inherited from me. "Grandma, why did you bring that ugly old bag?" My 17-year-old granddaughter Olivia sneered, pointing. "It's going to ruin all the pictures." "Olivia," Emily snapped softly, not to correct her, but because she was embarrassed. The tone told me she agreed, but was too polite to say it. "It's okay, sweetheart." I smiled, brushing my hand over the cracked leather. "This is the bag I carried on my wedding day with your grandpa." "Wow! History lesson?" David muttered, glancing up from his phone just long enough to smirk. 16-year-old Jack looked at me with guilt in his eyes, then slipped his earbuds back in. At least he still had a little respect left. While waiting to board, I asked gently, "Have you decided where you'll go first in New York? I know a few spots that aren't in the guidebooks." "Mom," Emily sighed, her voice tinged with annoyance. "We already planned everything. David found a great travel app," David added, eyes still glued to his phone. "It's got real reviews from people who actually know what they're talking about, not from old travel agents." I nodded and swallowed the words. I wanted to say, I had dreamed of this moment walking around Central Park with my grandkids, telling them stories I'd read my whole life. Now, that dream felt like an illusion. Flight 447 to New York is now boarding. Emily jumped up. immediately turning into the commander of her little unit. Okay, everyone, let's go. Olivia, phone away. Jack, earbuds off. David, you've got the passports, right? I followed behind, watching them move like a perfectly rehearsed team. Emily, leading the kids on either side, David bringing up the rear. It looked like a photo shoot for a travel magazine. Mom, come here, Emily called, her tone tight. I stepped closer, feeling her shoulders stiffen as I joined the group. As we walked down the jet bridge, I overheard her whisper to David, I don't know why she had to come. It's just 2 weeks, David said. But those pictures are going to be a mess with... They went silent when I walked closer, but the damage was already done. With who? With me? I sat in the middle seat, in the very last row, while the rest of the family sat 3 rows ahead. For more legroom, Mom, Emily said with an empty smile, the kind she always used when she was lying. There's no extra legroom in economy class. But I said nothing. For 8 hours on the flight, I quietly watched the tops of their heads tilt toward each other as they chatted. Olivia took selfies by the window. Jack shared his earbuds with David, both of them laughing at something on the screen. And Emily. She kept packing and unpacking her purse, organizing everything with that anxious precision she always had when she was nervous. I opened New York. A Traveler's Guide, the book I'd bought back in 1987. The cover was worn, the spine cracked. My finger traced the places I'd once dreamed of seeing: Street, Patrick's Cathedral at sunrise, Wall Street at sunset, the Bethesda Fountain at midnight. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe, away from the routines and the daily tension, we'd feel like a real family again. Maybe Emily would remember why she once wanted me to come. When the captain announced we were descending into New York, I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. Outside the window, the city stretched out like a golden map, loud, old, and dazzlingly alive. 46 years after my first dream of coming here, I was finally about to set foot in this place. I didn't know that just 3 days later, I'd be standing alone on a corner in Manhattan, holding a melting ice cream cone, wondering how a mother's love could so easily become a burden. The plane landed smoothly, and Emily turned to me for the first time in hours. "Welcome to New York, Mom," she said. For a brief moment, her smile looked genuine. I should have known the most dangerous smiles are the ones that seem sincere. That smile vanished the moment we stepped out of JFK Airport. The reality of New York, the summer heat, the rushing crowds, the blaring horns clearly irritated her. While waiting for a taxi, she kept checking her phone, comparing her photos from the airport to some invisible standard of perfection in her head. "This Instagram filter can't even save this one," she muttered, staring at a family picture where I stood in the background, smiling. The first 2 days were a delicate dance between fake kindness and quiet exclusion. At breakfast in the hotel, Emily always arranged the seats so I sat slightly apart from everyone else. At Central Park, when I tried to tell the kids about the park's history, David cut me off to show them a TikTok video about the same thing. "Way more fun than old stories, right?" he said. Everyone laughed except me. Jack glanced at me with a flicker of guilt but said nothing. At just 16, he already understood that in this family, loyalty had a price. The third day began with the suffocating heat of a New York summer. When we reached Times Square, the crowd moved like a living river, voices, car horns, and street music blending into a dizzying noise. "Family photo time?" Emily asked, pulling out her phone. "The light's perfect right now." They instantly got into position. Emily and David in the center, Olivia and Jack on either side. I stood a few feet away, waiting for someone to ask me to join. "Mom, can you take the picture?" Emily said, handing me her phone. "Of course." I was the family photographer, never the one in the photos. I took dozens of shots from every angle, their smiles growing stiffer and more practiced with each click. When I handed the phone back, Emily examined each picture carefully, like a professional editor. "Perfect," she murmured. "Finally, something worth posting." "Let's get one with Grandma," Jack said. The only one who seemed to remember I existed. Emily hesitated, her smile faltering for a split second before she regained her composure. "Sure, just one." I stepped closer, feeling how they subtly shifted to make room but still kept that stiff distance, as if my presence ruined their perfect symmetry. A kind tourist nearby offered to take the picture for us. "Smile," the man said. But when I looked at Emily, her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the same expression she'd worn at Richard's funeral, polite enough for the occasion, but hollow, emotionless. After the photo, Emily said she wanted ice cream. We found a small, charming shop in Greenwich Village. I offered to pay for everyone an old reflex after decades of being the family's mobile bank. "1 scoop of pistachio," I ordered. While waiting, I noticed Emily and David exchanging glances, not loving ones. But something calculated, urgent. "It's so hot," Emily said, fanning herself with a napkin. "Maybe we should split up for a bit? I'll take the kids. Shopping, and Mom and David can rest somewhere cool." "Actually," David interrupted, "I'll go with you. Mom, would you mind waiting here? We'll meet up later." A chill ran down my spine, but I nodded. "Sure. Where should we meet?" I asked. "We'll text you once we pick a place," Emily replied quickly. They handed me the pistachio cone and disappeared into the crowd so fast it felt rehearsed. I stood there, holding the melting ice cream, realizing this feeling was terrifyingly familiar, as if I'd just been fired from the only job I ever truly had, being a mother. An hour passed. Then 2. The ice cream melted. I tossed it in the trash. I checked my phone over and over. No message. I tried calling Emily, but it went straight to voicemail. The sun shifted across the sky, shadows changed direction, and I was still standing in the same spot, like a lonely street lamp in a sea of strangers. Tourists passed by, some glancing curiously at me, an older woman, lost in a city she didn't know. By 4 p.m., a text finally appeared. I read it 3 times before I could absorb it. "Go back to the hotel. You're a burden." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no word on where they were or when they'd return. Just 5 short words cutting deeper than any insult ever could. I stared at the screen until it went dark, reflecting my own face, pale, tired. After 43 years of working to support them, after emptying my savings to give them this trip, after babysitting so they could find themselves, I was now nothing but a burden. I tried to find my way back to the hotel, but New York streets felt like a maze. Every corner looked the same, every sign blurred into the crowd. My phone had no signal, and when I finally caught one, I realized I didn't have international data. Around 6 p.m., I sat in a small cafe near the Bethesda fountain, the very place I'd dreamed of, seeing for decades. But instead of tossing a coin and making a wish, I sat crying quietly into a napkin while the waiter watched with gentle concern. "Ma'am," a middle-aged man with a coffee-stained apron approached. "Are you okay?" I'm fine," I said, trying to sound steady. He smiled, a real smile, not the impatient kind I'd seen all day. "I'm Luke," he said. "Can I help you with something?" And so I told a stranger what I couldn't even admit to myself, that my family had abandoned me in New York, called me a burden, that I was lost in every sense of the word. Luke listened without interrupting, only nodding from time to time, his brown eyes filled with the kind of understanding I never expected to find so far from home. My grandma used to say, he murmured, family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by who stays when things fall apart. I looked toward the fountain, where tourists laughed, took photos, tossed coins, and wished for beautiful things. For the first time in my life, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd given my love to the wrong people. Do you have a place to stay tonight? Luke asked softly. I reached into my purse for the hotel key and froze. Everything was under Emily's name. Could they lock me out? I'd paid for that room, yet I wasn't sure I was still welcome there. Of course, I lied. The truth was too humiliating. But Luke seemed to read right through me. Come on, he said. We'll figure it out. We walked through the cobblestone streets of West Village, heading toward the hotel, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something unfamiliar. Someone was on my side. It was freeing, comforting, like taking off a pair of tight shoes after a long day. I had no idea that less than 24 hours later, I would make a phone call that would change everything, that the woman they called a burden would soon become their worst nightmare. But right then, I was simply walking beside a kind stranger, slowly realizing that sometimes you have to be completely lost to finally find yourself. Luke was right. When we reached the front desk, the hotel clerk looked at me with that familiar expression of pity, one I recognized instantly after decades of working in customer service. Miss Mary, he said, I'm so sorry, but the room account is under Miss Emily Carter's name, and she left instructions that your stay has ended. Those words spread through the air like poison. Emily had called ahead to make sure I couldn't stay. Not only had they abandoned me on the street, they'd made sure I had nowhere to go. I understand, I said, my voice eerily calm. 43 years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me how to stay composed, even when the world was collapsing. Luke spoke quickly, his voice growing sharper. I couldn't follow every word, but I recognized the tone of someone defending me. My cousin has a small apartment above the cafe, Luke explained. He's in Boston for the summer. You can stay there tonight. We'll figure things out tomorrow. I can't accept that kind of kindness, I protested, my voice trembling. It's not kindness. Luke smiled. It's New York neighborly, totally different. That night, I sat in the little apartment, smelling faintly of coffee and basil, staring out the window at Manhattan glowing like a sea of golden light, and made my first real decision in years. I picked up my phone, opened my contacts, and scrolled to the name still listed under Favorites, though I rarely had the courage to call it Helen Ross, my only true friend, the one who stayed after Richard passed. For years, I'd become a shadow of myself, existing only to fix Emily's problems. The phone rang 3 times before Helen answered, her voice as strong as it had been back in college. Mary, why are you calling me at 2 a.m.? What's going on? I'm okay, Helen, I began, but my throat tightened. How could I explain that my own family had discarded me like trash? How could I admit I'd been so blind, so desperate for affection, that I'd let them treat me like a walking ATM? Mary, you're scaring me. What happened? Helen asked. And so, I told her everything from the moment they left me behind, to the message, to being locked out of the hotel. She was silent as I spoke, only the sound of her steady breathing on the other end. That shameless girl, Helen finally said, her voice sharp with anger. Still, I laughed the first time I'd laughed in 3 days. Helen, I need to ask you something. About the house. What house? Emily's house. Legally, it's still mine, right? When Richard passed, you inherited it, Helen said. Then, when Emily got married, you put the house under her name for convenience with the mortgage. But you never finalized the ownership transfer, she reminded me. I remember you asked me about it 5 years ago. I told you it was smart to keep it that way, just in case. My heart pounded. What do you mean? I mean, my dear friend, legally, you're still a co-owner of that house. And as a co-owner, you have rights, plenty of them. What kind of rights? I could hear Helen smiling through the phone. For example, the right to sell it. I went silent, thinking about the implications. For 5 years, I'd quietly paid part of Emily's mortgage, telling myself it was an investment in my grandchildren's future. I'd never imagined it would become an investment in my own freedom. Helen, hypothetically, what if I decided to sell my share? You'd have to notify Emily and give her the chance to buy it back. But if she can't? Helen paused deliberately. Then the house goes on the market. How long would that, conses, and adbavability, take? With California's housing market right now, you could get an offer in a week. I closed my eyes, picturing Emily's face reading those words. You're a burden. 5 words that shattered 40 years of unconditional motherhood. Helen, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I want you to start the process of selling the house tomorrow morning. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Mary, are you sure? Once it starts, there's no going back. What can Emily do? Treat me worse? Leave me in another city? Helen sighed. You're right. Okay, I'll do it. But first, I need you to promise me one thing. What's that? Stay in New York for at least a week. I don't want you there when it all blows up. And honestly, after everything you've been through, you need time to find yourself again, instead of saving people who don't deserve it. I looked out the window, watching Manhattan's lights shimmer, thinking of the decades I'd lost and the dreams I'd barely dared to have. Deal? Helen asked. Perfect. Oh, and Mary? Yes? I'm also canceling every automatic transfer from your account to Emily's. If they see you as a stranger, then let them live like strangers. After hanging up, I stayed awake until dawn, watching the city come to life, street vendors setting up coffee stands, workers sweeping the sidewalks, life unfolding in simple, beautiful ways I'd long forgotten. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what Emily needed, or how to fix David's problems, or whether I had enough money for the next family crisis. I was only thinking about myself. When was the last time I did something just because I wanted to? When was the last time I made a decision without wondering what Emily would think? I couldn't remember, and that's how I knew I was doing the right thing. At 8 a.m., Luke knocked softly on the door, holding coffee and warm muffins. Did you sleep well, Miss Mary? Just Mary, I corrected him. And yes, better than I have in years. So, what's your plan for today? I smiled, savoring the sweetness of 2 words that felt both strange and wonderful. My plan. Not Emily's plan. Not what Emily wanted me to do mine. I said slowly, I'll go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. If I go early, it should be quiet. Excellent taste. Luke grinned. I know someone who works there. I can help you get in before opening. Really? Of course. He shrugged. That's what friends do. Friends. How long had it been since anyone called me that, not out of politeness, but from the heart? While Luke went downstairs to prepare coffee, I got a text from Helen. The paperwork has started. The house will be listed before the weekend. God help Emily. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Somewhere in the sky, my family was flying home, probably still laughing, thinking they'd easily gotten rid of their old burden. They had no idea that the so-called burden was about to become their worst nightmare. As I ate my muffin on the balcony overlooking New York City, enjoying the first truly free morning in decades, Emily, 3,000 miles away in California, was discovering that hell sometimes has a street address. 3 days later, Helen called back. Her tone carried a mix of professional satisfaction and personal concern. Mary, You need to hear this. Big news. What is it? Emily called my office 17 times yesterday. My secretary had to warn her that if she kept calling without an appointment, we'd file for a restraining order. I pictured Emily always composed, always in control, now losing her mind in Helen's office. But instead of sadness, I felt something else. It took a few seconds to realize it was satisfaction. What happened? They got back from the airport yesterday and found for sale signs all over the lawn. David actually fainted right there. The neighbors had to help Emily drag him off the grass. I burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. Seriously? He fainted? Like some Victorian lady? And here's the best part, Helen continued. When Emily tried to use her card to buy dinner last night, it was declined. Every account, every automatic payment you'd been funding, all canceled. So Emily had never known where the money came from. You mean she didn't even know I was covering half their living expenses? Exactly, Helen said. David had been lying, claiming he had a consulting job for the past 2 years. He used your money to keep up that lie, made Emily believe he was contributing financially. Suddenly, everything made sense. David's new confidence, his condescending tone, and Emily's shift from gratitude to resentment. They'd been living off me while convincing themselves I was useless. Helen, has anyone made an offer on the house yet? 3 people already, and it's only the 2nd day on the market. One even offered above the asking price. They saw the photos and want to close fast. How long do they have to buy out my share? I've sent the official notice. They have 30 days to secure financing around $400,000 at market value. It was the largest sum I'd ever dealt with, and Emily would have just 1 month to come up with it, or lose the house she'd always assumed was hers. They won't be able to, will they? Impossible, Helen confirmed. With David's credit history and no financial backing from you, no bank will lend them money, especially not to a 42-year-old man who's been unemployed for 3 years. After hanging up, I walked through Greenwich Village, the cobblestone streets gleaming in the afternoon sun. I stopped at a small church where candles flickered like falling stars. I hadn't prayed sincerely since Richard's funeral, but that day, I lit 1 candle and whispered a prayer that even surprised me. I didn't pray for forgiveness for Emily, nor for reconciliation, nor for things to return to the way they once were. I prayed for strength, the strength to stand firm when Emily finally reached out, because I knew she would. The call came that evening, just as I was eating pasta on Luke's small balcony. The phone buzzed so hard, it nearly fell off the table. Mom? Mom? Emily's voice trembled, broken, almost unrecognizable. Mom, please pick up. I let it go to voicemail. Then came one message. Then another. Mom, I don't understand what's going on. Helen said you're selling the house. There must be some mistake. Please, Mom, we're panicking. Olivia won't stop crying. At least explain to us what's happening, please. I know you're angry about New York, but this has gone too far. Can we talk like adults? I laughed out loud. Adults? As if abandoning your 68-year-old mother in a foreign city was the act of a grown-up. An hour later, the 4th message came, and the tone had completely changed. Mary, not Mom anymore. Please call your lawyer and stop this madness. You can't do this. It's our home. The place where the kids grew up. Our home. Not your grandchildren. The children I had raised, fed, and loved. That sentence cut deep. They spoke as if I were a stranger, trespassing in their perfect lives. The 5th message arrived at midnight. Fine, Mary. I know you think this is some petty revenge, but you're hurting innocent people. Olivia had to explain to her friends why there's a for sale sign outside. Jack hasn't slept in days. If you want to punish me, Go ahead, but don't punish the kids. The kids, the same ones who played a part in my humiliation in New York. Olivia, who called my purse ugly, said it ruined her pictures. Jack, who stayed silent when they left me behind. But I'll admit, that message touched me more than the rest, because it held a sliver of truth. They were victims, too. Victims of parents who taught them that love comes with conditions, that family is a transaction, that some people are more deserving of love than others. I almost called back. Almost. Instead, I typed one message, careful, final. Emily, don't contact me again. When you decided I was a burden, you lost the right to my help, my money, and my concern. All legal matters are now handled by Helen. The reply came instantly. You're my mother. But I had already turned off the phone. The next morning, Luke took me to the Met Museum, as promised. We arrived before the doors opened to the public, when the only sound of footsteps was a faint echo down the street. In that stillness, surrounded by centuries of art and faith, I looked up at the ceiling, where the morning light streamed through the glass skylight. It's beautiful, isn't it? Luke whispered. Yes, I said softly. But when I look at these paintings, I think about creation itself, that sometimes, to begin something new, you have to completely destroy what came before, as if even God had to separate light from darkness before creating something beautiful. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. It was surely another message from Emily, but for the first time in 40 years, I felt no urgency to answer. Instead, I stood still in the museum hall, a 68-year-old woman learning the difference between being needed and being valued. And for the first time in decades, I felt genuine love for the person I was becoming. 3 weeks after Emily's desperate call, I sat in a Spanish class for older adults at a small community center near Bryant Park in New York. I struggled with irregular verbs, laughing at my own silly mistakes. Next to me, a German woman around 60 named Greta conjugated verbs flawlessly, while an Australian man named Tom mixed English and Spanish so hilariously that the whole class, including our teacher, couldn't stop laughing. Mary, muy bien, Mrs. Benedetti exclaimed, when I finally managed to form a complete sentence about where I used to live before moving to New York. You're improving very fast. After class, Greta invited me for coffee. We quickly became close, two older women discovering the sweetness of late-found freedom together. She told me she had sold her house in Seattle after her children told her she was too old to live alone. And you? Greta asked as we waited for our cappuccinos. Have you heard anything from your family? Helen keeps me updated, I said. The house sold last week. Emily and David had to move in with his sister. How do you feel about that? That was the question I asked myself every morning when I woke up. At first, I thought I'd feel guilty, that familiar weight I'd carried through decades of motherhood. But when I searched for that feeling, all I found was a strange sense of peace. I feel relieved, I finally said. It sounds awful, but it's the truth. Greta nodded. When my kids told me to sell my house and move into a nursing home, I felt betrayed too. But now I realize they helped me. They forced me to find myself again, without depending on anyone. That afternoon, I walked back to the small apartment I'd rented with part of the house money. It wasn't big, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a quiet street in Brooklyn Heights. But it was mine completely, unquestionably mine. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to ask anyone's opinion about curtain colors or whether I should replace the dining table. I hung Richard's photo above my bed, but I didn't hang the family portraits I'd kept for so many years. Instead, the walls were covered with photos I had taken myself. Sunrise over the Hudson River, children playing ball in the park, Luke smiling as he made coffee. Pictures of a new life captured by me, for me. My phone stayed silent for days. Emily had stopped calling after Helen informed her that all legal matters would now go through her office. But that afternoon, as I was preparing a simple dinner, pasta and salad, the phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Grandma! The voice was young, shaky. It was Jack. My heart pounded, but I kept my tone steady. Hello, Jack. I got your number from Aunt Carla. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. Of course. Emily had never allowed her children to have private contact with me. She was always the gatekeeper, controlling every conversation. How are you, sweetheart? I asked. A long silence followed, heavy with unspoken things. I'm confused. Mom says you lost your mind, that you sold the house out of revenge. And what do you think? Silence again. I think Mom's not telling the whole truth. She never does. It was the first time I'd heard Jack doubt his parents. Something inside me softened. Jack, about what happened in New York. I know, he interrupted. I know it was wrong. I wanted to say something, but I was afraid Dad would get mad. David, the man who lived off my money, yet managed to make his own son afraid of him. Are you okay? Do you have a safe place to stay? We're staying with Aunt Susan. It's not great. She and Mom don't get along. Olivia's angry about having to change schools. Olivia, the granddaughter who called my purse ugly and said it ruined her photos. For a moment, my protective instinct stirred. But then I remembered that cold, dismissive face in New York. And the feeling faded. And you, Jack, how are you really? I'm scared. Everything changed so fast. One day we were a normal family, and the next everything fell apart. But I feel guilty about what happened in New York. It wasn't right. Those were the words I hadn't realized I'd been waiting to hear. Thank you, Jack. Are you coming back? He asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Would I go back? For weeks, I had been living one day at a time, learning Spanish, walking along cobblestone streets, and savoring the slow rhythm of life. But that question made me think about the future. I don't know, Jack, I said honestly. Right now, I'm learning how to be happy here. Are you happy? A question no one had asked me in years. Was I happy? I thought about mornings spent having coffee with Luke, afternoons at the photography club, and nights reading on my little balcony as New York slowly drifted to sleep. And I knew the answer. Yes, I said, surprised at how certain my voice sounded. I think I'm happier than I've been in a very long time. I'm glad, Jack said, and I could tell he meant it. Grandma Mary, I'm sorry for everything. After hanging up, I sat on the balcony, watching the city lights come on one by one. New York at night was like a living museum. Every building a story, every street a poem written in steel and light. I thought of Jack, probably hiding in some corner of Aunt Susan's house, brave enough to call me even though he knew his parents would be furious. It was the first sign that maybe not everything was lost, that in the next generation, at least one person had learned the difference between love and obligation. My phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for talking to me. I'll write you a real letter soon. I love you, Jack. I smiled and set the phone aside. Tomorrow was my birthday, 69 years old, and for the first time in decades, I would celebrate it my way. Luke had told me about a small Italian family restaurant in Brooklyn where they sang Happy Birthday and served homemade tiramisu. Greta and Tom had promised to join me. A small, intimate party with people I had chosen and who had chosen me. Not out of obligation or blood, but because they truly wanted to be there. As I got ready for bed, I looked at Richard's photo on the nightstand. What do you think, my love? I whispered. Is it wrong for me to be happy without them? The night breeze moved the curtains, and for a fleeting moment, I almost heard his voice, the words he'd tried to tell me for years. That I deserved to be loved for who I was, not for what I could give. For the first time in decades, I slept peacefully, worrying about no one but myself, and woke the next morning with a smile. The morning of my 69th birthday glowed with that golden light only New York can offer. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. The smell of Luke's coffee drifted up from downstairs, and a distant church bell rang in rhythm with time, as it always had. I rose slowly, something that once seemed impossible when every morning used to start with a list of things to do for others. Today, my only plan was a birthday lunch with friends Luke, Greta, Tom, and a few people from the photography club, the family I had chosen. While making coffee in my small but entirely my own kitchen, I noticed an envelope slipped under the door. My name was written in familiar handwriting, Jax. Inside were several folded pages. Sent from California. I sat on the balcony, the city of New York waking beneath me, and opened it, knowing that whatever was written inside might mark a turning point in my new life. Dear Grandma Mary, I don't know whether to call you Grandma Mary or just Grandma Mary. Mom says you're not our grandmother anymore, that you chose strangers over family. But I don't think it's that simple. Maybe we were the ones who started treating you like a stranger long before you ever did. I've thought a lot about New York, about that day in Greenwich Village. I remember the exact moment we walked away. Mom said something like, "Finally, we can relax." And Dad laughed. Olivia took a selfie right after, smiling like she'd just won something. And me, I stayed silent. That's what haunts me the most, that I stayed silent. I was only 16, and I thought that was a reasonable excuse. But deep down, I knew it was wrong. I knew you don't abandon your grandmother 68 years old in a strange city. I knew you were the reason we could even take that trip, the one who paid for so much. But going along was easier than standing up to my parents. Now, we're living in Aunt Susan's basement. Dad finally has to work at a hardware store, cutting keys and hauling bags of cement. Mom is always angry. Not just angry at you, but at herself, though she'll never admit it. I hear her crying at night, thinking, no one knows. Olivia's in her senior year, and she hates everything. She hates her new school, hates living with Aunt Susan, hates when her friends ask why we moved out so suddenly. But what she hates most, I think, is realizing that her parents aren't as perfect as she once believed. Yesterday, she asked me, "Did we really leave Grandma in New York?" When I said yes, she locked herself in her room for hours. I've started reading about New York, especially about women who rebuilt their lives after losing everything. I found a book in the library about people who started over late in life, and it made me think of you, about how you worked for so many years after Grandpa Richard died, just to keep the family afloat. About how you never complained, never made anyone feel like you were a burden, even though we definitely made you feel that way. Mom says you always knew the house was still in your name, that you planned everything. She says you're bitter and cruel, but I remember how you used to look at those postcards of the New York skyline taped to the fridge. How your eyes lit up every time you said that one day you'd visit Central Park in the fall. You were never bitter. You were patient for years, and we mistook that patience for weakness. Aunt Susan says Mom has always been selfish, ever since she was a kid. She wants the world to revolve around her. And when it doesn't, she creates chaos until everyone gives in. Aunt Susan said you were the only one who never said no to her, and that's what ruined her more than it helped her. I don't know if you're right to stay silent and not talk to us anymore. Part of me thinks you shouldn't forgive us. But another part hopes that someday you can forgive me. Not Mom, not Dad, Not even Olivia. They'll have to earn your forgiveness themselves. Just me. I've been saving money from my part-time job at the bookstore. I want to visit you in New York after graduation. I want to see your life now. Meet the people who matter to you now. I want to hear your stories about your new life, the ones you never told us. I want to take a picture of you in Central Park, the photo you should have had decades ago. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know it might be too little, too late. But I just want you to know, in this family, there's still someone who understands what we lost when we left you behind. Not the house, not the money, but you, the person who loved unconditionally for so many years, and who should have received that same kind of love in return. If you want to write back, I'd be happy. If not, I understand. But please, no matter what, know this. We didn't leave you because you were a burden. We left you because we were small, selfish, and blind, too blind to see that you were the gift we'd been given. Now I see it even. If it's late and I see it with love, respect, and shame. Jack P. S. I'm sending a picture I found in Mom's old things. It's of you and Grandpa on your honeymoon. I thought you'd want to have it. Inside the envelope was a black and white photo I hadn't seen in years. Richard and I at Niagara Falls, smiling as if we had the whole world in our hands. I was 23, he was 25, and life stretched ahead of us like a road paved with gold. I sat on the balcony for a long time, reading Jack's letter over and over. Each sentence felt like a tiny bridge across the chasm that had opened between us that terrible afternoon in New York. No, it wasn't enough to erase the pain. Decades of being taken for granted couldn't be healed by a single letter. But it was a beginning. And more than that, it was genuine. It wasn't Emily trying to manipulate me into coming back. It wasn't David making excuses for his actions. It was a 16-year-old boy taking responsibility, trying to understand and mend what had been broken. The phone rang. It was Luke. "Happy birthday, Mary. Are you ready for your big day?" "Luke," I said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." If someone once hurt you deeply, but then apologized not because they wanted something, but because they truly understood they were wrong, would you give them a second chance? He was silent for a moment. "This is about the letter from this morning, isn't it?" "How did you know?" "Disforwarding, because I recognize that look. The look of someone standing between the past and the present. Is that good or bad?" "Complicated," I said. "Oh, the best things are always complicated. We'll talk more over lunch." "Yes, I'd like that." That afternoon, at the small restaurant Luke picked in Brooklyn, my friends sang Happy Birthday and brought out a little tiramisu cake with a single candle. Greta gave me a silk scarf she'd found at a local market. Tom gave me an old poetry book by Emily Dickinson. And Luke handed me a small pot of basil. "So you'll always have a bit of your favorite kitchen wherever you go," he said, smiling warmly. When I told them about Jack's letter, the whole table fell quiet, the kind of attentive silence only real friends can give. "That boy is brave," Greta said. "It's not easy to admit mistakes at that age. The adults around him aren't exactly shining examples." "But do you believe him?" Tom asked. "Do you think he's truly changed?" "I think he's trying," I answered. And sometimes, trying is all we can really ask of someone. "So, what will you do?" Luke asked. I looked around the table at the people who had become my chosen family. 3 months ago, I hadn't known any of them. Now, they were the ones singing to me, worrying for me, offering honest advice without expecting anything in return. "I'm going to write him back," I said at last. "But with conditions." That evening, I sat at the small desk in my Brooklyn Heights apartment with a set of stationery I'd bought from a shop near Bryant Park. It took me 2 hours to finish the letter, every word chosen carefully. Dear Jack, your letter arrived on my 69th birthday, and I can't imagine a better gift than the honesty and courage you shared. It takes great bravery to admit your mistakes, especially when you're young, and even more when it means questioning the very people you were taught never to doubt. You were right. I didn't walk away from my family because they were a burden. I walked away because I finally realized I had spent my whole life being a supporting character in someone else's story. For decades, I defined myself by what I could give, not by who I truly was. My own family, the very people I loved most, taught me to live that way, and I allowed it. What happened in New York wasn't just about being left behind. It was the breaking point after years of being treated as invisible, existing only to fund and fix everyone else's problems. It was hearing whispers that I ruined photos, being tolerated instead of welcomed at gatherings I paid for. But your letter showed me something I didn't expect, that not everything is lost, that maybe in the next generation, there's still hope. And now, Jack, here are my conditions. Because unconditional forgiveness isn't forgiveness at all. It's permission for the hurt to continue. If, after graduation, you still wish to visit me in New York, I'll welcome you. But you'll need to pay for your own trip, not because I can't help, but because you need to understand that love isn't a financial transaction. I will never be anyone's secret again. If your parents forbid you from keeping in touch with me, you'll have to decide for yourself what matters more. I won't hide, and I won't apologize for existing. I won't return to California. Nor will I rescue that family from the consequences they created. New York is my home now, and the life I've built here is mine. If one day you truly want to have a real relationship with me, not with the family's talking ATM, but with a woman who has her own dreams and values, then you'll have to get to know the person I am now, not just remember who I used to be. I have friends here, Jack, real friends, who choose to be with me because they care about me, not because they need anything from me. I have a life that makes me happy. On my walls hang photos I've taken myself in the places I've always wanted to go. For the first time in decades, I am the main character in my own story. If you can respect that, if you can see the Mary of today instead of clinging to the grandmother from the past, then yes, we can start again. Not to return to what was before, because that before is broken, but to build something better. I've enclosed a picture of me in front of the Bethesda fountain in Central Park. It was taken by my dear friend Luke on the first day of my true freedom. Look into my eyes, Jack, you'll see the difference. It's the difference between existing for others and living for yourself. I'll be here when you're truly ready to meet this new person. With love, cautious but sincere, Mary, your grandmother, but so much more. I reread the letter, then placed it on the nightstand. Tomorrow, I would take it to the post office, along with the photo Luke took that morning. Me, standing in front of the Bethesda fountain, smiling, no longer the self-sacrificing grandmother, but a whole woman who had found herself again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mom says you've gone crazy, that you've ruined our lives. But I just want you to know not everyone thinks that way. It was Olivia. Short, almost abrupt, perfectly in character for my 18-year-old granddaughter. But it was a beginning. A small crack in the wall of silence Emily had tried so hard to build around me. I stepped out onto the balcony, looking over New York at night. Somewhere below, strangers were making wishes by the Bethesda fountain. Back in California, my old family was learning to live with the consequences. And I, in my small apartment, scented with basil and coffee, was writing a new chapter of my life, one that finally belonged to me. I don't know how this story will end. Maybe Jack will visit, and we'll build something new and beautiful. Maybe Olivia will learn that love matters more than appearances. Or maybe I'll live out the rest of my life without them, among the friends I've chosen and the journeys I decide for myself. But for the first time in 69 years, the ending of the story is entirely mine to write. And that more than any reconciliation is the sweetest victory. I stood on the balcony until the lights of New York slowly dimmed as the city drifted into sleep. Tomorrow would bring another Italian class, more photos to take, more moments of freedom to savor, and perhaps another letter from California. A letter that might help me decide whether love can be redeemed or if some wounds are simply too deep to ever fully heal. But that is for tomorrow. Tonight, I'll sleep as I have for the past 3 months as a free woman, in the bed I chose, in the city that chose me back, with the peaceful smile of someone who finally understands the difference between being needed and being cherished. And in my dreams, I'll walk the cobblestone streets, not toward the past, but toward a future entirely, completely my own. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real events, with names and locations changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Mary is not the only one who stayed silent out of love many of us have. Believing silence would preserve peace. But does silence truly save love? Or does it slowly erase who we are? And you, if you were in her place, would you stay silent or speak up to protect your heart? Whatever path you choose, remember, God always sees and blesses those who live with honesty and genuine love. Thank you for joining this story today. Stay until the end to watch 2 more favorite videos, stories that touch the heart, just like Mary's journey to find herself again.